Welcome in, everyone. I'll let everybody kind of get settled in, but I am excited for today's conversation. We're going to be talking about metrics in IT, metrics that matter. We covered this a couple of years ago and thought that it might be good to revisit it and see if there's more that we can dive into with this topic. But before we get started, if you are new to the IT Leadership Lab, welcome in. This is a community that is for IT leaders, built for IT leaders, by IT leaders. So a very community-driven platform and forum where you can share all of the information that you have, and you can learn from people that have actually been there before. So definitely feel free if you have never been in the lab before. Feel free to poke around. There's a lot of really great resources. If you have any IT leadership questions, definitely drop them into the community. There are a lot of folks, including Nate, that are always more than happy to answer any questions you've got. Welcome in, everyone. All right, Nate, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you do and kind of what you're working on too?
Sure. So I started in IT about 30 years ago, spent the first 20 years internal IT, um, every role, help desk to IT director. And about 10 years ago, I went out on my own, started an MSP called Better Business Technology, because for some reason I thought I could do a better job. Found out there's a lot of really good MSPs out there. Shout out to Clark and his team, who are doing really good work. The last few years, maybe 4 or 5 years, my focus shifted from more of the managed services to helping build systems and platforms that help IT leaders make better decisions, to align IT with business, which we all say that we want to do, but to do so in a quantifiable way. So those are the projects that I'm really passionate about and what I've been working on for the past few years.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that you're working on a book and everything too, and I know it's very eagerly awaited by some of the community members.
Don't
Uh,
hold your breath, anybody.
I,
It'll be out, I promise. It
it,
really will.
it it will be out.
Yes.
You know, you know, come hell or high water, it will
Yes.
come out at some
Exactly.
point. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you on for this conversation today. Um, and I wanted to kind of jump right into IT metrics and um, how people might align them with business objectives and things like that um, when it comes to demonstrating the value of IT to the rest of the organization.
Yeah. So um, my way of approaching everything is to sort of organize it into some type of structure or framework, if you will. Sometimes I call them buckets. It just helps me take all of the information. Um, it has a place to go, a place to live. And then when I need to access that piece of information or make sense of what's going on, or sometimes more importantly, explain it to someone who's not technical, um, I can easily access it. So that's sort of the approach I'll take today. None of this is gospel. It's just kind of a light framework, maybe to spark some ideas. Metrics are one of those things that are driven by what your organization is trying to accomplish from a business perspective, but also what you as an IT leader are trying to accomplish. So some of these things may apply, some of them may not. But what I'm hoping some of them will inspire you to maybe modify or see things in a different way, um, to develop your own set. So that being said, I break it down into sort of four domains around metrics, and there's infrastructure, sort of our systems and uptime and those types of things. Then there's also the service desk, right? How quickly are we responding to requests, closing tickets, and those types of things? How happy are people with our service? And then there's security, right? How are we addressing those things in terms of mean time to detection and response, hitting our SLAs, things like that. And then business value, right? The things that we measure that are directly contributing to the things that the business says that they care about the most. So, a lot of my answers today will be in one of those four buckets as we start going through. And you may have more buckets, but those are the four that I primarily focus
Okay, cool. Yeah, I wanted to I you had sent over a document before, and we'll make sure that gets sent out after. And I wanted to talk about what the 7 C's of a good metric. I thought that was really interesting. Um, and I wanted to kind of talk about that and get your perspective on maybe how that came about and what those 7 C's mean to somebody that is building out that dashboard or building out that framework.
on. Yeah. So the way it came about was about 4 or 5 years ago. I was reading an article on CIO.com, and it was actually and I apologize, I can't remember the guy's name, but I don't even know if it came from him, but he kind of went through them, right? And he was just saying it was the 7 C's are sort of like a filter. So you're sitting there and you're asking yourself, is this something that I should measure? What should I measure? And the 7 C's sort of helps you answer that question, right? And the first C is it connected um, to something that the business cares about? And that's incredibly important. And the whole point is, if you don't meet the criteria of the 7 C's, then it's probably something that you don't need to measure. Um, in the yeah, there you go. There's the article, and really good, fast. So the document that I put together is it will have the 7 C's, and then you can take a deep dive into the explanation because it will be much better than mine. But I absolutely use this criteria to determine whether this metric makes sense or not.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I realized.
It's okay.
um, yeah. Okay. So I there were also 3 tiers of IT metrics too that you
Mhm.
were discussing, and so those are business metrics, usually for executives, service metrics for IT leadership, and then IT metrics for internal and operational. How do you decide on which metrics are for those different tiers? And then how do you also make sure that metrics are not just vanity metrics and they are actual impactful metrics that you, like a team, will need to be measuring in order to gauge success?
Yes, really good questions. So, if anyone's listened to me before, you already know the answer to this first question is that it has to be tied to something uh, of the business. So, in those 3 tiers, the top tier is the business metric. We don't determine the business metric. The business determines the metric that matters, right? And then we sort of just tag along. So that goes back to having these conversations with business leaders to understand what is important to them. Once we understand what's important to them, now we're within those four buckets, if you will. How do we contribute? Right. So I'm sort of protecting it. I'm sort of helping move it along, whatever the answer is. The important thing about a metric is to understand, like, I mean, it measures, but the function of a metric isn't necessarily just to measure. Right? It's really a tool to drive outcomes. Right. The measure is almost like a byproduct, if you will, right, of it. But when we approach it from a standpoint of, oh, I should be measuring something for the sake of measuring it to kind of track how I'm doing, um, we kind of get into that realm where we get confused between output and outcome. And one is about productivity, right? One is the one that actually helps the business. And then when we start framing those metrics back to the business, they don't necessarily care about what we're doing. So the business metric is going to be driven by what the business cares about, what's mission critical. That's what we also need to understand. And then from there, we'll start determining what things contribute to that, and measuring those things. The second one is from the service level, but also within a business language, right? So this is the service that we provide, but we still want to speak of it from the business point of view, the metric that is. And then the third one is the IT metric, which is where we can just relax and talk amongst ourselves in real IT language, because those are the things that we totally understand. It's our internal operation, right? Our operational excellence, our goals, and that though is at the bottom. So business at the top of the pyramid, if you will, IT metrics at the bottom, and then service metrics in the middle, which sort of acts as a bridge between the top and the bottom part of the pyramid.
Mm-hmm. What do you think are some of the, in kind of each of those tiers, what are some of the biggest like must track KPIs that you think are essential to any IT department that might not have kind of a well defined uh, template or benchmark right now?
Yeah. Well, for the business, what does the business care about? I just think that's so important. If you go through the seven C's, that's going to eliminate a lot of stuff, right? And just being honest, so coming coming from the IT world, we just measured because I don't know, my boss used to measure this, so that's what I measure. Or I know this IT person over here, and they measure this. Or I read an article, and they say that this is what we should measure. We don't really give it that much thought, um, but I think that's because we're measuring for the sake of measuring and not using it as a tool to drive outcomes. So, from the business point of view, that's a conversation that the business will drive. That input that we get will tell us what we should be measuring, but we're really measuring business outcomes at that point, right?
Mhm,
Not necessarily IT measures or outputs or outcomes, right?
mhm,
Unless we can make a direct connection to the business. This part is important, especially when you start having conversations with senior leadership, and you're saying, hey, we closed 600 tickets, and we found 2,000 phishing incidents that we prevented, and they don't care anything about that unless, of course, you can say, but what does that mean to the business? So,
mhm,
in terms of the business measure, that's definitely the one. In terms of service, some of the metrics, again, might be how quickly are you responding to tickets? How quickly are you closing those tickets? Um, some of them are satisfaction surveys, just is the customer satisfied
mhm,
with the service, because they don't necessarily go, hand in hand.
mhm,
Um, Sometimes the way we measure systems, and here's what I mean. So we'll say, well, um, is the system reliable? Versus, like, um, is versus uptime or something, right? So it's like, well, because the system can be down 4 or 5 minutes a day, and it's like, yeah, it's steady, but it's not really reliable. So we just kind of have to be careful in those metrics, what we're measuring, and be able to tie them back to the business case. Why does this matter to the business?
mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And then all systems aren't equal. Right. So I think one of the helpful things is to sort of prioritize which systems in the organization, or sort of, I would call fives, mission critical. They may have a whole different set of metrics and a whole different set of SLAs,
Mhm,
because of the very nature of their importance. Um, and then internally, the metrics for IT are the things that are important to you, but only to the degree, not vanity, to the degree that it's advancing what you're trying to do as an IT leader, right? Where
mhm,
are we taking this organization? So if it's moving us toward that, what helps prompt us in that direction, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. But those are the metrics that we're going to choose.
mhm. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So would you say that, you said it like as a pyramid. Would you say that the ones at the top that are those business critical metrics kind of help feed the other metrics at like, that you are measuring? Um,
Always,
yeah. Okay.
always. I always go, if there is no business, there is no IT department. So, it's just if we just remember if we just remember that. I'm not saying who's most important or, your work is more important. Not making that judgment, but let's just keep in mind that without customers,
Mhm,
without a business, um, they really don't need systems, and if they don't have systems, they don't need us. So
mhm.
business outcomes will always drive, or should always drive every decision that we make, whether it's metrics or spend or what have you.
Mhm. Yeah, and when it comes to the like review cadence, that's something that you also mentioned in that document.
Mhm.
When should those metrics be reviewed? When should they be reevaluated? And then maybe who should
Mhm.
be involved in that process too?
Yeah. So I kind of look at it as weekly, monthly, quarterly. Okay. So weekly is more the team. And if if you're a solo IT leader, this means you. This is all yours. Sorry about that. But if you have a couple of people that are there helping you, it's even cooler. The idea is at the end of the week. Here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for any anomalies. What happened that we didn't expect. Right? What kind of escaped outside the boundaries? So that's what I'm looking for, and I'm doing that every single week. I want to catch those, and hopefully, we're using like Ninja One tools, and we're getting this data back. It's automated, right? We're not sitting there data gathering, but we're actually, as a team, internally once a week, looking at those things that are sort of outside the norm for us. Um, and then there's the monthly meetings, and again, depending on the size of your organization, but this is more around the IT leaders or maybe some of the engineers or administrators who are responsible for certain systems. And this is sort of our check in again to see that are we trending in the right direction.
Mhm,
And a lot of this, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later, is around like how our spend is going and what is our spend being used on, and some of those benchmarks in terms of percentages where it should be. But as a leadership team in IT, this should be a monthly cadence. And then, of course, from a business standpoint, um, in the MSP world, we call them QBRs, quarterly business reviews, but it's the same kind of thing. Like quarterly, we should be reporting metrics to senior leadership. Um, Hopefully, they're in the room, like we're doing this live and we're getting this feedback and having this conversation. But again, we just want to make sure that we're still aligning and that we're tracking towards the things that they said are important and that nothing's changed.
mm, mhm,
And we don't want metrics there that no one cares about anymore and we just forgot, right? So we set them up in the beginning and I don't know why we're tracking, we just always tracked it and nobody cares. So um, that's kind of how I would break it down. Again, it would work a little bit different in every organization and depending on team size. But that's how I would sort of break down the 3 layers.
okay. And you mentioned something that I was going to cover, but I want to touch on it is whenever a metric is no longer useful,
Mhm.
how do you kind of tell that you're just pulling something for the sake of pulling something because you've always done it? What are some signs that you can kind of start phasing that out because it doesn't actually have, any impact?
Yes. So, speaking of cadence, so we kind of went like weekly, monthly, quarterly. So here's an annual cadence. It should be a review of your metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The question that really, why does this matter? And if you can't answer why it matters, then you can cut it. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So it might still matter, but
Yeah.
you have to be able to ask that question because sometimes we are creatures of habit and people come and go. You inherit things from other leaders, whoever was doing it before, and we just kept doing it, and no one questions it. So the annual cadence would be a review of all these metrics, and to me, just one question: why does this metric matter? And if you can answer that. from either a business or service or an IT perspective, then it's worth keeping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on that note, Kelly asked a question. How have you navigated situations where the businesses ask for metrics um, doesn't match with reality, i.e., they aren't tied to real business outcomes or what they act on is different from the ask?
It's never happened to me.
No, of course,
Well,
everyone's always asking for the most pertinent things.
yes. So I'll go back to the seven C's, right? And this is tricky because Kelly's question is a little bit about metrics, but it's a little bit about politics as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I always go back to quantify. Okay. So if you're asking for something, and let me just read this again, they aren't tied to real business outcomes. So quantify it on a scale of 1 to 5. How important is this to what we're trying to do as an organization? It's a very business positioned question. I believe I've never had anyone get mad at me for asking in that way. I'm not saying no to it, but I do need to understand. There are times I'm sorry, yeah. I mean, we're going to do things we don't want to do, but I am going to push back and have them quantify why that's more important. Another thing I would say, Kelly, is this: compare it to the other things that they've asked you to do. So you asked me to do 6 things. And I have resources to do those 6 things, albeit narrowly. And now you come with this ridiculous number 7 that has nothing to do with anything. So I'm going to put it back on you and I'm going to explain where we are in terms of resource allocation to the things you've told me are important. And now you've added this one, which is going to require resources. And I just need a little bit of help in how I should reallocate resources toward making this happen for you because I really want to. And now the decision comes back to them because they have to make the tough call about, which pocket are we going to take a few coins out of to make this ridiculous thing happen. So
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
that's how I would start and hope I could work my way out of it. But sometimes I just can't. Sometimes just to please the customer, you just go, okay. But
Yeah.
here's the thing: a lot of times they never come back and ask you again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They never come back. You say, "Oh, sure, of course." And then it's like,
Yeah.
"You'll
You're
never
like,
come back."
if you could do this for me, then I will try to
Yeah,
accommodate. And then, once it reaches that point, it's like, oh, is it that
yes,
important that they're going to spend their time to
exactly.
provide that?
And sometimes you're just sort of walking them through a process, which I'll go back to my buckets and why I think having a method or a framework is so important. Because when you walk through it, you can help other people walk through it.
Hmm.
And they may have just not given it consideration. They may not be aware of other factors that are going on. And so in you kind of walking them through this and asking them to quantify and how should we reallocate, you're actually kind of helping them come to a better decision, a decision that they come to, not
Hmm.
something you told them or fought with them about, but you sort of led them there.
Hmm.
And when that happens, those tend to stick because they feel like it was their idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Eric also asked, how do you generate metrics for things that might not be covered by normal metric measurement, but contribute to overall productivity?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I think when you say that, I think of a lot of the cybersecurity stuff, right? It because that's tough to be able to give you an ROI in some kind of way, which I don't really think we should be looking for ROI all the time anyway. I mean, I don't know why I don't know why IT is asked to do ROI, and I don't see
Mm,
them asking legal or finance or anybody else, right? It's cost of doing business. Doesn't mean that we're not fiscally responsible, but why does everything I touch have to have an ROI?
yeah. Yeah.
And so that's my rant. The answer to the question is uh, how we frame the question, how we're looking at it. Meaning, are we looking backwards or are we looking forward?
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example of what I mean. So we're spending money on cyber, and I have certain obligations around patching. I have certain SLAs for certain systems that are maybe mission critical more so than others. Um, I have a mean time to detect. I have a mean time to respond. So I'm going to look at those things, and instead of saying we bought these things, I'm going to say the window for our mean time to detection went from 72 hours to 24 hours
Mm,
for our critical systems. We reduced the exposure. Okay, our response time went from X to this time, right? Which means that we've mitigated, right, some of the damage that could be done in the event that, right, we get breached. Those are the things that we're tying now to business outcomes, because what it's saying is you really care about this particular solution, this platform. It's important to the business. It's mission critical to the business, and we are better positioned to respond and to protect it.
mhm.
So that's one way, right? But that's a forward-looking type of framing, as opposed to here's what we've done back here. No one really cares. Another way to look at it is sort of around benchmarking. So I might say, well, the average, and my numbers might be a little old, so don't hold me to these, but the average breach might cost $4 million. Let's just say that this is totally wrong and it's a quarter of that number. And then I doubt that we're spending $1 million on cyber each year, right? So some of this is just mitigation, and it's what we do when we buy any kind of insurance for anything, right? Every business has liability insurance. We don't like to pay it, but we pay it because we know it's cheaper than if something goes bad and we have to respond to that. So those are just two ways, I kind of off the top of my head, that I would think about positioning that, but really forward looking instead of um, lagging
Mm,
indicators.
mhm. Yeah, I think that there was also, I think last month, whenever we talked about the modernization, you had that story about the upgrading all of the workstations.
Oh,
And I
yeah,
think
the
that that
accounting.
one is also really impactful if you wanted to kind of go through that again, because I think that is an example of how it's not necessarily like ROI, but there is a business impact.
Right. So the accounting department had old computers. And when I say old, I mean old computers. Okay. Not 4 or 5. I mean like more like 8 to 10 years old. So there's two things that are going on. One thing is that we're getting tickets constantly about it. So we care, bottom of the pyramid. Top of the pyramid could care less. That's what you're here for. Respond to the tickets, do what you have to do, keep the thing going. The people in accounting, though, they had an issue because it was affecting their productivity, but we didn't quantify it in any particular way. So one day I just went over to the room and I sat down there with them and actually witnessed, right, this event. And I said, how many times a day does this happen? And at least once a day, maybe twice a day. And so you just time it. How long does it take to shut down all the apps, to code reboot, boop, boop, log back in, and get back to work? And I think it was about 10 minutes, 12 minutes, something like that. And so at that time, I don't know, there were maybe 8 people in accounting or something in this company. And so I just did the math. I said, well, okay, so let's just say they're doing it once a day, 5 days a week, times 8 people. Accountants make roughly X amount per year. And it was around 30K. And then I had my number and I said, well, goodness, the computers that we want to buy are about 30,000. So then I took that to my boss and I said, look, I think that we can actually pay for these computers in our first year savings on productivity. And then after that, like we're all in the black. Right. That was it. He said, yeah, do it. Go for it. So, but I had been asking for months. The people in accounting had been asking. So it was the same question, the same ask. It was the framing
Mhm.
that changed. So that's all I'm saying about Eric, to your question as well. It's how you frame it. And this is why I just press so hard on the business. What do they care about? and it's so hard to navigate and make good decisions if you don't know what they care about.
Mhm.
So, what their priorities are, and then from there, attaching what you're trying to do to something that they care about, it makes all the difference in the world.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so your 5-step metrics framework, I figured we'd kind of walk through that for anybody that is wanting to build a metrics framework rather than just kind of pulling whatever metrics people ask for. And I wanted to see what you thought, if you had any tips, things like that.
Okay. Well, let me actually look at my 5-step framework. Well, I think this is what we just covered, right? And I'm kind of always going to talk about this part of it. Is what does the business care about?
Mhm,
That if I can't tie every single thing that I do back to that,
mhm,
then I'm lost. And again, the resource allocation, because I mean, really, in a way, that's kind of what we're measuring in some way. It's like, how are we allocating these resources, and then are they having the outcomes um, that we want? Um, and earlier we talked about the getting the data and
mhm,
having some type of system that's pulling that data, like automating a lot of that,
mhm,
especially for the weekly anomaly checks, if you will.
mhm,
That's incredibly important. You don't want to sit there searching for data, right? You
yep,
don't want to spend your time doing that. You want to just be spending your time analyzing and then, if necessary, responding.
mhm,
Um, so one of the things before we start measuring, I think is important is like, do we have our house in order? So this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but if we can't do the basic stuff, or as one of my old mentors would say, if we can't block and tackle, then we shouldn't try to run any fancy plays. So one of the things I think is just to get your basic IT response infrastructure to a place where you're able to sort of meet the business need. Because if you start measuring metrics right now about what you're doing or what you're not doing, and you don't really have the infrastructure together, you don't have your service desk together, you, right? I mean, what are we really measuring? It's just it doesn't really make sense. So I think one of the first things is block and tackle. Like, can we do the basic stuff at a pretty decent level, and then that becomes a baseline, and then from which to improve. But that's critical for us to just be able to get to the basic stuff.
mhm,
Um, yeah, the patterns. So step four, analyzing and propose. So here's how, because I'm always using nature. So you go out in the yard and you see all the weeds, and you go out and you pull the weeds, and it looks great for a few days, and then the weeds start coming back, and the weeds come back sometimes the same or more than what they were a week before. So we're heading in the wrong direction. It means that we're not getting to the root. But when you go out and you start pulling the weeds out by the root, and you come back a week later, yeah, some more weeds came back, but not as many. And so what we're seeing is where's the trend going? And so that's what we're looking for. The ticket count, but really the types of tickets regarding certain systems, as those begin to trend down, that's how you know you got to root causes.
mhm,
And if they're not, then we know we're missing something. And that is a great like flag for us in terms of where we should point our attention, because something's going on there. We're not getting down to the root cause.
mhm,
Um, and then the last one, to implement them, of course, and to review. Going back to the annual reviews, um, and if you think about it, it sort of makes sense that if the metric exists to help drive outcomes, once those outcomes are achieved, do we still need the metric?
Mhm.
right? Because we probably have new outcomes that we want to achieve, right? New mountains to climb, and the metrics should be um, either modified or taken away and replaced with something that reflects where we're trying to go currently.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to also cover some of the questions we got
Mhm.
from the lab beforehand. I went ahead and just asked what the most challenging part of demonstrating IT value is. Um, Marquez says two big challenges. One, showing the value when the team is actually being proactive instead of reactive. It's hard to measure problems that were avoided. And it's also knowing what data to pull that resonates with the audience you're talking to. We've already touched, I think, on that
Mhm.
second point. But the first point of, it is hard to show, it's hard to measure problems that were avoided. So how do you kind of show the value of proactivity versus reactivity and how that impacts everything?
Mhm. So this, so I'm going to say this sort of in a backwards kind of way, right? So this is I can't, but what I can do is infer it, and here's what I mean. So there's a sort of a genuine general benchmark around reactive activity. And it goes something like this. It says if your service desk or your IT team is spending more than 50% of their time on reactive activities, then we have a problem, right?
Mm.
So, and it's not your team necessarily, right? There's something in the system. That's what I mean earlier about the root, right? We're not getting to the root cause. Now, when I say it's inferred, it's like, well, if we could take that from 50 to 40, then now we know that 60 has to be on proactive stuff. So I
Mhm.
can't necessarily measure the proactive part, but what I can do is measure the reactive part, and then whatever's left over is the proactive part.
Mhm.
If that makes sense, right? So
Yeah.
it's sometimes I can't directly measure it because I can't really put my arms around it. But by reducing the reactive part, it just stands to reason that the proactive stuff is increasing. And I may even frame it that way, right? So I might even say, depending on who I'm talking to, instead of saying, oh, yeah, we reduced our reactive time from 50% to 40%.
Mhm.
Or I might say, we went from 50% proactive activities to 60%. Just sounds better. Right.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
same statement, same numbers, just sounds a little bit different.
Yeah. No, that is a great way to frame that. Beth also asked, I'll kind of just read through her
Mhm.
situation right now. We have an IT team of 21. My team is 7 people strong, and of those staff, 3 are tier one tech support from a cooperative of 420 plus employees and growing. That
Mhm.
means each tier one supports 140 plus people apiece, and my tier two support about 105 plus each. I would love to put these kinds of facts in front of our executive suite, especially as we've suffered some hiring pauses and stringent hiring justifications in the last year, but there's no mechanism. We have a dashboard that shows software and hardware in our environment, but I don't think anybody in leadership looks at it.
Mhm.
So, how do you how would you suggest that Beth kind of get the numbers that matter in front of leadership in a way that they, will actively care about and will actively, look at that information? Because it sounds like she has a dashboard and she has all of these metrics set up, but, you know, how did she get people to care about that?
She can't. They don't care.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't. But Beth, here's how. This is what I would do. Some of this is going to sound redundant, and I apologize, but it's a system. It's a pattern of approaching things, like the way I solve problems. So if you find some value in it, then definitely run with it. It has to start with, what do they care about then? They don't care about the dashboard, fair enough. What do they care about? I need to know what that is. Not from an IT perspective, but from a business perspective. What are we trying to do? We're a co-op or whatever, great. Where are we going in the next year to 3 years? Not technically, from a business point of view. Right?
Mhm.
More members, more market share, opening more stores, whatever it is co-op is around. What are we trying to do as a business? Help me understand. What do we want the customer experience to be? So that's first. Those are more goals, initiatives, and we've talked about this in other talks. There's a second lens that ties right into this metrics thing that I've not talked about before, but it is a metric, okay? And I don't think we've talked about this one today, um, but I think it's on that guide that
Mhm.
you'll be able to download later. So in the workshop, we talked about resource allocation, that we're kind of economists in some ways. And that's how I'm approaching it, right? When I go in and talk to them, I have so many people, talent, I have so much time, right? I have so much treasure, budget money, and we have so many tools. The four T's. It's all I have. Okay. You're going to tell me what's important. We're going to figure out how I contribute to what's important. And then I'm going to assess my own readiness, my own capability to deliver on what you need from me. And then we're going to look at what that gap is between the two. And then my resources are going to go attack that gap and fill that gap. Can they do it or can they not? And that's the metric that I'm trying to show them. Here's the second one. That's one lens. It's goals, it's initiatives, it's capability, it's identifying the gap, and it's directing resources to fill the gap. That's one lens. The other lens, and I kind of get some of this from Gardner, I've just modified it a little bit, and it goes something like this. I call them strategic factors, and some people call it run. I call it operations. So there's four buckets. There's operations, there's growth, they call it transformation. I don't like. I call it risk, right? And then customer experience. Those are the four. Those are the questions I'm going to ask in that meeting. So I have goals and I have initiatives and what's important, prioritizing, great. But I also want to understand where are we going from a strategic point. We need to really get operations together over the next 1 to 3. We really want to grow the business. Innovation, reduce costs. That's kind of all in that bucket. Somebody, I won't call them out here, that we talked with earlier this week is working on a project around security because they want to get contracts, right? So it's risk, but it also is within the growth category as well. So anything that I'm trying to do towards helping that makes sense. And then customer experience or your customer facing things. So
Mhm.
again, I'm looking at that and saying, okay, what's the kind of the industry benchmarks around these numbers? And it goes 70 to 75% of IT departments of their budget are being spent on run operations, keeping the lights on.
Mhm.
Okay, and then maybe 20% around innovation or growth, and then the rest, whatever, towards transformation and so forth. That number should be heading down over time. Okay, like that 70 to 75%. That's not like, oh, we're there and we're trying to hold that number. We want to see that number decline over
Mhm.
time because that means I have resources that I'm reallocating from keeping things running to actually growing the business, making the customers a little bit more sticky because they're happy with their experience, right? Mitigating risk, things of that nature. That's what I want to see. Those are the conversations that I'm going to have. They don't care anything about hardware and software. The story about the computers, I told that story. The people in accounting complained about it. I complained about it. They did not care. But when you reframe it towards, oh, wow, this actually helps move the business and we make money. We're actually in the black for 3, 4, 5 years.
Yep.
I want to hear that conversation. So that's what I would say. The dashboards that you have are meaningful, but they don't care. So you have to show them where their pain is and how you're trying to help, right, save them or
Mm.
push their initiative forward,
Yeah.
and then they'll care about that. I promise
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, those are all of the questions and stuff that I had, but I wanted to see if you had any other kind of topics. Oh, actually, there was one more question in
you.
the
Yeah,
chat.
Josh has one.
Yes. Do you find that metrics change based on the size of the company? So, for example, you support 5 to 20 employee companies and a 1 to 100 employee company. Do you find it best to use a universal set of metrics, more so for ease of understanding and translating?
So do they change based on size of company? Sure. Um, but there's no universal set of metrics. And here's why. Because every business has different set of goals, priorities, objectives. So I can't have a universal set of metrics for them because my metrics are tied to what the business cares about. That's our first point, is that everything is tied to that business. And so every business is going to have a different way of approaching it. Now, that being said, maybe on the bottom part of that pyramid, the IT metrics, yeah, there's probably some overlap, right? Because you, like Josh, you probably care about the same stuff I care about in terms of running an IT department, and we may share some of those metrics. But a lot of those ones, especially at the business level, at the top of the pyramid and in the middle, that's where we'll start to see a little bit of divergence. Because again, the metric exists to push forward towards an outcome. Like we're using it almost like a steering wheel, right? Not a gauge per se, if that makes sense. And it's that little bit of shift in how we look at what metrics are. We're trying to encourage people. I did want to add one point that we didn't cover around metrics and our internal IT teams.
Mhm. Yeah.
This is just Nate's, whatever thoughts about this. Okay, so take that for what it's worth. But the metrics, individual metrics should only be talked about like in coaching sessions. All the metrics for your IT team should be team metrics. That's very important because there's two things going to happen. If you start making and like posting individual, like, oh, how many tickets did Brittany close? Oh, she closed 50 tickets. Nate, oh, he closed 25 tickets. But Nate's working with those, end users who, who they are. And so, of course, he only closed 25 tickets. But here's what happens: your team will start gaming it a little bit, right? Because again, I'm always acting in my own self interest. If you're telling me I'm being judged by this individually, so two things that happen by doing it as a team, you keep people from gaming the system, right? The metrics are team aligned. But what you're also doing without even saying a word is that you are designing collaboration into the system. You didn't write anything, you didn't have a mission statement or our vision for IT is to build a collaborative team so that no, you didn't say a word. But what you did is you made collaboration in my self-interest. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to collaborate. So I would say the individual metrics for coaching, and then I would have team metrics as sort of our guiding star in terms of driving towards those outcomes.
Mhm.
Bingo, Kelly. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, good point. I could just do this.
Yeah, I feel like I should just make like a printout of your like two things to live by. Everyone works in their own self or acts in their own self interest. What are the business objectives? Those are
Yeah.
like the two big principles I feel that
Yes.
it always comes back to when
Yes.
you're talking about you could come up with a whole list of metrics, but what is going to make somebody care about them?
Correct.
Yeah.
And what an impact is this going to get them? Because this is part of the umbrella theory is that leadership isn't about getting people to follow you. It's about designing systems where they make decisions on their own. Like they do what you want them to do because you design a system that makes that the easiest thing for them to do. And they view it as, oh, this benefits me. Totally different than, I'm the boss and oh, okay, I don't want to get fired, so I'm following him. No, it's a design exercise. And once we get that in our minds, then it's just a handful of principles. I mean, literally, there's a handful of principles that once you get, you almost know the answer to every problem that comes up. Or at least it takes you, 75, 80% towards a really good decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Well, yeah, now I think that is all the questions that I have. But is there any kind of final thoughts that, or anything that we maybe hadn't covered that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, well, we kind of jumped in on the one about the your employees, and those metrics as well. But I can't emphasize enough, um, and I think one we missed, and I'm sorry, we were talking about some things that are hard, and I think I went to security, some things that are hard to quantify. We didn't talk about the resilience
Mm.
piece of it as well, sort of the business continuity, disaster recovery
Mhm.
part of it.
Yeah.
Um, Another, so this is a mistake that I made. I'm just being honest. You can edit this part out of the video, because Nate never makes mistakes. Um, I didn't ask the questions. So I assumed. So now when I'm trying to build a disaster recovery or business continuity plan, and I need to understand mean time to recovery, I'm just generalizing. Well, every system isn't as important. And it really wasn't until I started doing the MSP thing that I kind of got like, oh, yeah, we can't respond to every system.
Mhm.
So some of the questions, as an example, will be um, how long can email be down in an emergency?
Mm. Mhm.
What's your window? Is it 24 hours? Is it 12 hours? Can we be down 2 days? What about the phones? What about this system? What about this platform? What about this? What about the internet? The
Mhm.
reason that this is important is because when you're doing your budget, redundancy is not cheap. So I can't have all of my systems redundant. And I promise you, the redundancy that you don't have, the person's going to complain about when something happens. But I didn't really get them to tell me what was important, right? So part of everything we do is just having these conversations, whether it's about metrics, whether it's about security, whether it's about business continuity, business resilience. It doesn't matter. I have to understand what this business cares about. And the better questions I ask, the better decisions you're going to make. And they're going to be defensible decisions.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps up this discussion. There's just so much that we could probably talk about, but
Mhm.
I am going to post kind of a wrap up of this stream today, and I will make sure to add in document that Nate created. Which thank you so much for creating something like that.
Mhm.
I think that kind of outline will definitely help people figure out what they need to add. I'll make sure y'all all have the links that we discussed as well. Um, but thank you so much, Nate, for being
Mhm.
on today. I really appreciate all of the information, and definitely I dropped a link to his website if y'all want to check out anything on there. If you're ever looking for any resources or help with IT leadership and things like that, a lot of good resources on there as well.
Yeah. And let me know, like, when you go through the document, if you want to add stuff to the document, if something was missed, something that would be more helpful. It's progress. It's not an artifact.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. We will be back in a couple of weeks. We're going to be doing a stream about IT documentation, which is super glamorous, very fun, very interesting conversation. So, um, yeah, really appreciate y'all jumping in today, though, and all the discussions from chat and questions there too. So,
Yeah, good questions.
yeah, absolutely. Appreciate your time, but in the meantime, I'll let y'all go get some lunch or whatever it is, and yeah, we'll catch y'all in a couple of weeks. All right,
All
take
right.
care, y'all.